I'm David Scandura,
I'm Justus Burkett.
and we are here to find out if Ladyhawke is the greatest movie ever made.
Oh God, is it Lent again already?
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made. A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Justus, we're doing another one.
We are doing another one. This is episode 2.
So I think we're kind of committed to this now. It wasn't just a one-off joke.
Yeah, at least we're at least committed to doing the movies that we have already watched for the episodes that we're immediately planning to record.
Exactly.
We'll see how many episodes that leads to, but it's we're doing the thing.
How's it going?
It's going, man. There's been a lot of stuff happening outside of the podcast, day job stuff, but then also theater company stuff. Just wrapped the summer season for the Flagstaff Shakespeare Festival, which I'm on staff for them. And that's been stressful and crazy, but I'm glad it's over and looking forward to relaxing a little bit. So yeah, it's been hectic. It's been pretty nuts, but trying to settle back into a somewhat normal routine now. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Work's been a little bit stressful, and I won't get into it too much. But otherwise, personal life has been pretty good, and been watching lots of movies. Have you seen anything or listened to any albums or discovered any art?
Yeah, so
recently,
what I've been enjoying recently, I think the last movie I watched before movies for the pod this week, since our last record, was just Red Dragon, which we watched together, along with our producer, who is also my wife, who, by the way, from henceforth until she chooses to have a name reveal, is going to be referred to on mic as the Podmaster. I think that's what we're going with.
Okay.
So you, me, and the Podmaster watched Red Dragon together, which obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, is the sequel to Silence of the Lambs. And that's the only movie I've seen other than movies for the pod lately. But we have been enjoying, the Podmaster and I have been enjoying the new season of What We Do in the Shadows, which is on Hulu, and FX, I think, is where it airs on. It's like Taika Waititi's vampire comedy series. And I don't think you watch What We Do in the Shadows.
No,
right?
and I haven't seen the movie either, but weirdly enough, my parents really like the show, which is just a very weird thing. They're the kind of folks who they watched Big Bang Theory every night. They were religious Big Bang Theory watchers, and they watched Graham Norton's show and stuff like that. Just very lowest common denominator entertainment. But at one point, at least, they were watching What We Do in the Shadows pretty regularly, which I found funny.
That is funny. I definitely, it's not a show that I would want to watch with my parents because it does get a little ribald at times, a little raunchy. But it's a great show and it's hilarious. So, maybe you're not giving your parents' taste enough credit.
It's something I've wanted to check out, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, you should check it out. What about you? Are you enjoying anything right now? Movies, TV, music?
I've watched over 300 movies this year.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. I did start the year with the goal of watching one movie a day.
Yeah, I'm probably at a sixth of what you are for the year. I've probably watched 50 movies this year, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
And it hasn't been an everyday thing. I haven't, but most days this year, I've ended up watching movies. So a few months ago, or probably a couple months ago, I watched Clint Eastwood's $1 Million Baby. Holy shit, is that a great movie?
Yeah, I've never seen it.
And if you want to be incredibly fucking sad,
I love being sad, you know that.
Watch $1 Million Baby. In fact, I don't remember if it was this year or last year, but I watched Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler as well. And I don't play sports. I'm not really interested in sports. I'm not even that big of an interested in sports dramas outside of I watched Remember the Titans in school and that sort of thing. But if you want to have a really, really sad, tragic double feature of sports movies. Watch The Wrestler and $1 Million Baby back to back and just feel like garbage.
That is a great recommendation that I may take at some point, because I love art that just makes me feel like there's a pit of despair that's opened up deep inside of me that'll never be filled. Which, speaking of which, the other thing that I have been continuously enjoying, this, and this is kind of a thing that's been on my radar for a couple months, but since it's the first time we're doing kind of this, like, what are we enjoying in media type check-in segment, the band Chat Pile, which I think got a mention on our first episode. I am still very, very deep in Chat Pile's discography. And I listened to the first time to their soundtrack for like an indie movie that they were a part of called 10 Killer, the 10 Killer soundtrack LP. And it's really different than a lot of their stuff because it's a movie score rather than just like a noise rock sludge metal album. And really interesting and really cool. And it was cool to see something a little bit more inventive from them. So that was neat.
Yeah, I don't normally seek out soundtracks unless I've watched the movie first. Is that like, are there vocals on that soundtrack, or is it completely instrumental? Or
there's a lot of instrumental tracks, but the title track, like the 10 Killer track, is like a full Chat Pile song.
Oh, nice.
And it's very much in their regular style. Then there's another song on there that they do that's kind of like a parody of like a country song about like drinking beer and hanging out at the lake. Very, very different than their usual style and kind of like a silly departure for them. I'm not sure where it fits in the movie because I haven't seen it, but so there's some vocal stuff thrown in there in addition to just kind of noise for the ambiance of the film.
I do enjoy hearing Ray Gun Bush scream like a crazy man.
Yeah.
So I will have to check that out.
Yeah, there's
and check out Ray Gun Bush's podcast, Across the Puniverse, where he covers the films of Albert Pune, who's a director that we will probably get to at some point on the podcast.
You might be hearing barking in the background. That's one of the two pod dogs that we have here in the home studio. My dogs Jill and Sonora are around the house. They're not in the recording room with us, but if you hear barking in the background, that's why. So.
They just want to talk about movies.
they want to be on the podcast.
So today we are talking about Richard Donner's 1985 film Ladyhawke.
Yeah.
And I've seen some Richard Donner, but I'm not terribly familiar with his work outside of like Lethal Weapon and the first Superman movie, Goonies as well, which I haven't seen in a long time, but it's actually sitting on my shelf and I need to revisit it. And I have never seen this movie before. So this was your suggestion.
It was. This was a Justus pick. Yeah.
So what's your history with this movie?
So this was on heavy rotation in the Burkett family home when I was growing up. My older brother and I watched this movie probably around a dozen times. I think we had it on either VHS or like early DVD growing up. And watched this movie constantly. We were both big fantasy fans, both big fans of just the whole like medieval epic sort of thing. Both big Lord of the Rings kids growing up as well. And we loved it. I think our mom liked this movie as well. So it was something that she didn't mind kind of throwing on to keep us occupied or whatever. So I've seen this movie a bunch, and it was like very, very formative for me. And one of the like probably one of the earliest movies I can remember watching enough times that I would consider myself like a fan of it, right? And since I reached about like high school age, kind of stopped watching it. It was one of those where I watched it a bunch like as a younger kid, and then grew out of it, quote unquote, I guess, and stopped being as into the fantasy thing in general. And kind of left it behind and hadn't watched it in like probably at least 16 years, until I watched it yesterday for this podcast. So I was excited to go back to it and revisit it and see how it held up and how my memory of it kind of matched up with viewing it this time. And as far as Richard Donner, I don't have a ton of experience with him. I actually haven't seen any of the Lethal Weapon movies. We're going to start, now that we're on episode 2, it's going to become abundantly clear how large the gaps in my cinema knowledge are. I said on the first episode, I'm like not a film bro. I'm just like a moron who likes talking about movies that I've seen, but I haven't seen that many movies. Like there's a lot of stuff I haven't seen. So as far as Richard Donner, I saw his Superman on TV like one time. I caught it on TV as a kid. I've never seen any of the Lethal Weapon movies. I have seen Goonies. I actually have a very funny anecdote about the Goonies, which is, remember when swine flu was a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so back when like swine flu was happening, my mom and I both caught it, and we were like really, really sick. And I stayed home from school, and she stayed home from work, and we were just like there were 2 couches in our living room, and we were each laying on a couch, basically just like super, super sick, like delirious, like super high fever, in and out of consciousness all day, like really, really like very sick with swine flu. And we just had the TV on, and it was like TNT or TBS or something, playing just movies in the daytime on like a Thursday or whatever, when we were like super sick. And I remember I had taken a bunch of cold medicine and also had a really high fever. And Goonies was on, and then right after it, the movie We Were Soldiers was on.
Oh right, I remember this. I remember this part of the story.
Yeah. And weirdly, because of like my fever and like cold medicine addled brain, just the state I was in, they ended up kind of being conflated into a single movie in my mind. And this is the only time I've seen the Goonies. So in my head, I was like, oh no, like Sloth has to get those kids out of Nam or whatever.
The Goonies went to Nam.
Right.
With Mel Gibson.
Yeah. And I was like, Mel, you gotta save those kids. Mel. That's my experience with the Goonies in particular, which is probably Richard Donner's, maybe his most successful movie.
It was a big, like, you mentioned you saw it playing on TV, like it was on cable all the time.
Oh yeah.
It was a big movie for a teacher to put on when they didn't want to teach for the day. Mm-hmm. Like I've probably seen the Goonies and like The Sandlot solely in the context of like on a shitty, the CRT TV that they would wheel out on the cart and they put the VHS in back in the 90s.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s. Like that's probably the only context I've seen the Goonies.
Yeah, your middle school history your middle school history teacher is like, I don't know, the Goonies are finding
fucking put the Goonies on.
Goonies are finding treasure. The treasure was put there sometime in the past. That's history for you.
But we are not talking about the Goonies.
We are not talking about the Goonies. We're talking about Ladyhawke.
We're talking about Ladyhawke.
Ladyhawke came out the same year as the Goonies.
Yes.
Interesting year for Richard Donner, releasing like probably the biggest kid power movie of the mid 80s, which was a decade of kid power movies.
Right.
In the same year that he released a low fantasy, romance sort of action, epic.
Right.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, Ladyhawke and Goonies both have a $20 million budget.
Right.
Goonies makes $125 million.
Right.
And Ladyhawke doesn't even make back that 20 mil.
No, yeah, it makes like 18 or something.
So, yeah, right? I think it was like 18.
Yeah.
And it's released at a time when like big budget fantasy was sort of hitting a stride in Hollywood. But at this point, it is starting to fade a little bit. Like, earlier in the 80s, you have Excalibur and Conan the Barbarian, which are both really successful. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch that hit around this time. Paul Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood, which also stars Rutger Hauer, doesn't do well.
Yeah.
I think it comes out later the same year that Ladyhawke does. And then I think in 86, Ridley Scott does Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry, and that doesn't do well. So there's something about the big budget fantasy film having like a very brief moment in Hollywood in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't, like I said, like I don't know why this doesn't quite make, I don't know why this wasn't successful.
Right.
I don't know if audiences were just not interested in this type of movie anymore. But this is something that like Donner had been trying to get made for years. Like he was almost getting ready to shoot it like a couple times beforehand. And originally had Kurt Russell cast in the Rutger Hauer role.
That would have been very interesting.
I don't know if that would have necessarily been a better movie.
I don't think it would. I think that's a worse movie. And we're big Kurt Russell fans here.
Yes.
But I don't think he's the right fit for the role. I think you need a Rutger Hauer type for this role.
Yes. Dustin Hoffman and Sean Penn were offered to play the Matthew Broderick role, but they didn't take it.
Can you imagine Sean Penn as Philippe Gaston?
Yeah.
This movie would be unwatchable.
So weird. And actually, Rutger Hauer was originally cast to play the Bishop in this film. And this is one where, like, I think the cast gets shuffled around a bunch. Like, Sean Connery, they talk to at some point, or they consider Sean Connery at least, but eventually, we get the film that we do, and I think we should probably just get into the film at this point.
Let's dive right into it. Yeah.
So title sequence.
Yeah.
You get like this sort of nice shot of the sunrise over the clouds, which then transitions to the moon, and then it starts like transitioning back and forth as the letters scroll across the screen. I think it's kind of cool.
I think this is such a banger of a title sequence because it's like so close up on the letters, and the font is sort of like a Stephen King 80s front of a paperback type font, right? It's like that really heavily serifed, like bold 80s. Like this is something that you would see like all over the new brand new bestseller shelf at a bookstore in the 80s or whatever is what this font looks like. And it starts so close in on the letters that you can't actually tell that they're letters, and then the letters like zoom like into view on the screen and it says Ladyhawke, and I'm like immediately when I was watching this yesterday, I was like, I remember every single part of this movie so well because I remember this title sequence so well. I remembered the score like perfectly, and this score, I have to gush about the score for a second because I think this movie has
we're right there. Yeah, that's what I had to.
I think this movie has some weaknesses which we will talk about, but I overall enjoy this movie a lot still upon rewatch. And one of the biggest things it has going for it is just this banger of a score. It's got like synth, but also there's like full orchestral stuff going on. It is such a powerhouse 80s score. It's so sweeping and so romantic. I love it so much.
So yeah, it's composed by Andrew Powell, who often collaborated with the producer on this for the score, Alan Parsons from the Alan Parsons Project. And together they kind of combine that prog rock style of the Alan Parsons Project with orchestral music and Gregorian chants, and to me it sounds kind of cooler on paper than it actually functions in the movie, but there are times where it really works for me. And during this intro I was like losing my mind at this fucking song, especially because like this is at a time when orchestral scores are the go-to for science fiction and fantasy.
Right.
And Donner specifically didn't want to do that.
Right. And there is some full orchestration, but there's also like guitar solos and like these big like synth swells.
Yeah, there's a wild guitar solo in this opening theme.
Yes, in the opening theme, which got me. I was smiling so wide on my couch watching this. I was like, I am 10 years old again. I'm staying up late. I ate a bunch of red vines and I'm having a good time. So anyway, that's we got the title sequence. We got that banger of an opening theme.
And then we immediately cut to a hanging.
Yes.
We start the first shot of the movie after this title sequence.
Yes.
Is
criminals being
hanged.
Yes.
In medieval France.
Hanged. Yes. Thank you. I said hung, which is incorrect, and the Podmaster is gonna get on my case about that. But yeah. So while these criminals are being hanged, we are introduced to our protagonist, which I had sort of forgotten. I had sort of forgotten that Philippe Gaston, the mouse, is the main character of this movie. In my memory, like Rutger Hauer as Navarre, who we'll meet later, looms so large. Michelle Pfeiffer as Isabeau looms so large. The Bishop has such presence that I honestly thought he was in way more of this movie than he actually is. But the main person that we're with in this movie is this guy, Philippe Gaston, the mouse, who is a pickpocket. And he's played by Matthew Broderick. And he's the first person that we meet in this movie.
Climbing out of a sewer like he's Andy Dufresne getting Shawshank Redeemed.
Yes.
Crawling through miles and miles of shit and mud.
But he doesn't hang a poster over the little hole that he escapes through, which, by the way, is a tiny grate in the floor of his like prison cell. And it looks so small that you would have to be like a 2-year-old child to fit through it, and I'm really confused about how Matthew Broderick squeezed out of that hole.
Yeah. So the guards come to the prison, looking for him to bring him out to be executed.
Yes,
and he's escaped. And he's climbing through the sewer.
Yeah, and he's got the guy from Silence of the Lambs who throws his jizz at Clarice Starling as a cellmate.
No shit.
No, not really.
No. Okay. I was like, oh my god.
I'm just saying he's like a comically insane person.
Oh right.
Yeah, and he's like doing little rhymes, and then a thing that I really liked is Matthew Broderick's cellmate who's still in the cell. Broderick did not rescue this apparently insane man along with him.
He did just kind of dip.
He just left him there. But he's his cellmate is doing these little rhymes, and he's like, "Oh, the mouse couldn't stay. He ran away to ease the pain. He's down the drain." And one of the guards is like, "Hang this guy," which I think is so funny that they came there specifically to hang Philippe Gaston, Matthew Broderick's character, and finding that he had escaped, and this guy's doing poetry about it, they're just like, fucking kill this guy instead. It's like, we're hanging somebody today. And this poetry sucks, so you're next in the noose, buddy. But yeah, so then we see Broderick clawing his way out of the dungeons of Aquila, is what we learn that this place is. And he has a line that I think is really funny. This kind of introduces you to the comedy element of his character. He is sort of cracking jokes this whole movie. And he says, "It's not unlike escaping mother's womb. God, what a memory." And I'm like, this implies that he remembers being born? Yeah. Which is insane. But yeah, it kind of introduces you to a sense of humor. He's also talking to God the whole time.
He does.
Yeah.
He's always making these bargains like, "God, if I swear, if you let me out of this, I'll change my ways, I'll do that." And to the point where he says that, like, he does a similar bit like at least a dozen times in this movie.
Yeah.
So he climbs up this sort of shaft in the sewer, up to this grate underneath the church where the guards are searching for him. We get this moment where he's sort of talking to someone in the church to, like, I don't know, try to get their help.
Yeah.
And someone steps on his fingers, gripping onto that grate, and he falls back down into the sewer water.
Yeah.
And continues his escape through the sewers.
Yeah.
And we cut to the Bishop of Aquila.
Yes.
Who orders his lackey, Captain Marquette, to search for him.
Yes. And I just want to say really quick, the Bishop of Aquila, played, I believe, by John Wood is the name of the actor. I don't know him from like anything else, but he is giving a performance in this movie. And he's like chewing scenery he's I guess a big theater actor. I was reading on his Wikipedia that he was like personal friends with the playwright Tom Stoppard and was like very well known for theater. And he is giving like a really big, broad, like theater performance in this movie that I love. He is like gobbling down on this scenery anytime he's on screen. And I think that's why, seeing this movie as a kid, I misremembered him being in it much more than he actually is, because his presence is so strong anytime he's on camera. I love this performance.
Yeah, he's having a lot of fun with the role.
Yes,
for sure.
He's like just mustache twirling, like comically evil in this role, but not in a way that feels out of place for the movie, right?
Yeah,
because it's kind of this fantasy romance and it requires kind of a big villain. And I really, really like his performance. So yeah, he's talking to his top heavy, who's Marquette. Yeah.
And just introducing the villain in that scene, just orders Marquette to hunt down Philippe Gaston.
Yes, because nobody can escape from the dungeons of Aquila.
Yes.
And if one person does it, and Marquette's kind of like, well, he's just like my Apple Watch thought I was talking to it, which I was not. But yeah, if the bishop's basically like, if one person escapes from the dungeons of Aquila, it doesn't matter if he's just like a petty pickpocket. It shows weakness, and like, we can't afford to appear weak is kind of his mentality. So he's like, we can't just let him go. We have to hunt him down and let people know that, this shit doesn't fly, basically. Right. Which kind of gives you an idea of how he's running this place. He definitely rules with an iron fist and governs through fear. Everybody's kind of afraid of him. And Marquette here does, for the first time of a few times in this movie, I think he kisses the ring. Literally, the bishop has a ring that Marquette keeps having to kiss, and I was like, man, what a degrading existence for this guy. where you gotta take orders from this boss, and he's like, fucking kiss the ring before you leave. Remember who's in charge. Remember who signs your paychecks.
But Philippe does escape the dungeons of Aquila.
Mm-hmm.
He swims out to the moat of the castle. He steals a bag of coins off of a guard that's sort of sitting on the dock. And we get this sort of brief montage of him escaping into the wilderness. I like this bit where he sort of stumbles across this camp and distracts these kids by being like, "Look up there!"
Yes.
And he takes he takes shoes or something, and one of the kids turns back and goes, "He's stealing Daddy's shoes."
Yes,
that was very funny.
in an atrociously obvious ADR line,
yeah,
right, where it's like very, very clear that line was added in post. The levels on "he's stealing Daddy's shoes" are totally different than any of the dialogue in the scene itself, or like the diegetic sound. Which I will say, this movie does have, again, some flaws. The ADR is one of them. There are several moments in this movie where I was like, wow, we are really not even trying to disguise the dialogue that we added in post. But I find it a little charming. Yeah.
And during this whole opening sequence, we've been cutting to this mysterious man on a horse.
Yeah.
This cloaked figure who has a hawk. We haven't seen his face yet, but of course that is Rutger Hauer.
Yes, Rutger Hauer dressed all in black on a huge black horse, looking like just the coolest.
It's such a good outfit.
Rutger Hauer in this movie is the coolest anyone has ever looked on screen. He looks so fucking cool in this movie. He's Etienne Navarre is the name of his character, and he is fully like a goth zaddy in this movie. Just in all black and red, and with the kind of attitude to match. He's very like somber and sullen, and definitely, if I had been a teen girl watching this movie, I probably would have had a big crush. I think I had a little crush on him last night when I was watching it.
I think we all do.
Yeah, I mean, it's Rutger Hauer. How could you not? Anyway, so here, the mouse. The balls on this motherfucker, because he escapes the dungeons, and he gets to some money, right? He picks that guy's pocket, steals some new clothes or whatever, and then the first thing he does is go to a bar. And he's like, I'm buying a drink for everybody in this place because I'm the guy who just fucking escaped from the dungeons of Aquila. And it's like, can you like lay low for 2 seconds, man? Like, he's incapable of being chill about this. Like, it's crazy to do a jailbreak and then just go to the nearest bar to the place you just broke out of and be like, I just broke out of fucking prison. And so what happens is exactly what you would expect.
As if on cue.
Yes, which is Marquette and his men, the bishop's men, are there and hear this and immediately attempt to arrest him. Of course, because that's clearly what would happen in this situation. And Philippe Gaston is not too bright.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a chasey chase.
Yeah, a little fighty fight too.
And then and Rutger shows up and starts icing motherfuckers with this crossbow.
Yes, he has a double-barreled crossbow, essentially. Basically, this crossbow that he's using it's 2 crossbows basically stacked on top of each other, but it's like it's one like weapon, right? But essentially he has 2 bolts loaded in at a time and 2 triggers, so he can like shoot one crossbow bolt and immediately shoot another crossbow bolt without having to reload. It is so fucking badass. So yeah, he ices a couple guys with this double-barreled crossbow, and everybody immediately recognizes him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is where I think this is the part where Marquette reveals that Navarre was formerly the captain of the guard for the bishop.
Yeah. And
Marquette's been his replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Navarre, Philippe has escaped to this point, and Navarre's kind of fending off the guards.
Right. I do want to say when he's fending off the guards, because full on fight breaks out here after he crossbows a couple people. A couple things I really like in this fight. One of the things Rutger Hauer does is grab a bunch of horseshoes and throw them at a guy. There's just like a bunch of horseshoes on like a ring. And he just like grabs it and just chucks a ton of horseshoes at this guy's face. And then the way he deals with another guy is like I don't know why Rutger Hauer Navarre doesn't have his sword out, but for some reason he doesn't have his sword like out at this moment, and a guy like advances on him with a sword, and Rutger Hauer just slaps the sword out of the other guy's hand. Just open palm slaps a sword out of this other dude's hand, and I think the dude just runs away.
I mean, I would too.
It's so fucking badass. I just love him palming a sword and just being like, "Get that shit out of my fucking face."
And I liked the part where he just throws Marquette into a campfire.
Yes. Yeah.
And Marquette's cloak kind of catches on fire a bit. That's just a very rude thing to do, but yes. I guess if you have to, you're in a fight.
Marquette's reaction to being lit on fire, and put out. He doesn't die here because he's like the main heavy of the movie, so we gotta definitely save time for him to show back up. But his reaction to being lit on fire by Rutger Hauer here is to do a very cartoonish Navarre, which I love. Like he's shaking his fist at the sky and being like, "I'll get you yet." It feels very kind of melodrama, and I enjoyed it a lot.
So we've escaped into the woods again at this point.
Yes, and at this point, Gaston, Broderick's character, is running away from Navarre, who has Navarre has rescued him, right? But Gaston doesn't know why Navarre has rescued him, and kind of doesn't want anything to do with this guy who just came in and started fucking murking people. So he's running away, and Navarre catches up to him and kind of nabs him.
And they eventually kind of make it to this this sort of hut in the woods with these two peasants. Mm-hmm. And this husband and wife peasant. And I like this lady is just kind of skipping around and like hooting.
Yes.
Like I don't know why as they're riding in. She's just bouncing around and making noises.
Yes, these are
this is like the worst hut ever. Like this place looks like shit.
Yes, these peasants are. I don't know if you've ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yes.
Okay, so like the peasants in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, who are basically just like moving muck around. These are those type of peasants, right? Where they're just like filthy, disgusting shit people.
Oh, I could smell them through the screen.
And this guy his face looks like the Pazuzu face that flashes in The Exorcist. He looks like a demon.
Just the worst mouthful of teeth.
Yes, and like a really long, gaunt, scary looking face. And upon seeing these two disgusting shit people, Rutger Hauer is like, "Do you have a barn we can sleep in?" And I'm like, these are clearly like Texas Chainsaw Massacre style hillbillies who are going to try and murder you.
And the husband is brandishing a large axe at this time.
Got the biggest axe
like this
I've
is
ever
a scary
seen.
fucking axe. And he's like, "Yeah, sure, you guys can stay here."
Yeah.
What do you think is gonna happen, Rutger?
Yes. Yeah, and it doesn't even look like a wood chopping axe. This is a murdering axe.
This is an axe solely designed for butchering people in their sleep.
I kind of want the spin-off about these two peasant people where it's just like a really like a grim, gritty, medieval set horror movie where like these two peasants just like kill anyone who like stops by their farm for the night or whatever. But yeah, so Navarre and Gaston stay with the two disgusting shit peasants in the barn.
There's this moment where Navarre asks Philippe to take care of his horse.
Yes.
And Philippe asks, "What's her name?"
Yes.
And Philippe says, Navarre says, "His name is Goliath." And Philippe looks down to check if the horse has a dick.
Yes. Gaston does check out the horse's hog. He's like, oh, all right. Well, good for you, Goliath. Congrats.
Gaston is then sent into the woods to gather firewood, and he's talking to himself. He feels like he's being mistreated by Navarre. He keeps doing this sort of dialogue with God.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to talk about Matthew Broderick.
Yes.
Because this is the point where I'm like, I need you to shut up.
Okay.
For 2 seconds.
Okay.
This is one of his earlier roles. This is like his 4th movie. Ferris Bueller is his next movie. And this movie kind of feels like he's warming up for Ferris Bueller a little bit.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah.
So how do you feel about him in this role? Because I think there's times where he works and there's times where I just need him to calm the fuck down.
Yeah, so this was the part of the movie that I was most interested in kind of reevaluating as an adult who hasn't seen this movie in a long, long time. Because even though I said earlier that I didn't remember how much he's in this movie, I did remember this performance a lot, right? And as a kid, I think it really worked for me because he's kind of doing... he's sort of doing a kid performance, right? Where he's kind of being like a little mid-80s kid power snot in this movie, even though he's like 20-something, right? He does sort of read as kind of an impetuous youth in this. And I think that worked for me when I was like 10 or 11 or whatever. Rewatching it, I did not find this performance as grating as I expected to. I actually was laughing at a lot of the jokes more than I expected to. However, this is the part of the movie I think that works for me the least. And I think the thing that I wanted was not necessarily anything different out of the performance, but I think to your point, maybe just a little less of it, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of this performance in this movie, and I think the performance works for me, but I think if I were to be able to get in a time machine and retroactively make any changes to this movie, I would put more Rutger Hauer and more Michelle Pfeiffer in it and cut back on the Broderick. I don't think I would tell him to do anything different. I think what he's doing for me works, but I do think it's a heavy spice that's being overused, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is Rutger Hauer's movie.
Yeah.
And yet we are seeing this story through the eyes of this character, but I think it gets to the point where Broderick's performance and the writing of the character just dominate the film more so than Rutger Hauer does.
Yeah.
But there is this moment here that I actually do like. One of the moments that I think works for me in terms of the humor, where Broderick's character hears something in the woods.
Yeah, he hears a wolf howling, I think.
And he, I think he doesn't know what it is at first.
Right.
He thinks that it's probably guards.
Right.
And he starts kind of talking to himself.
Yes.
To imply that there's like he's out there with like a larger group or something.
Yeah.
To maybe psych out whoever he thinks is
chasing
him.
He's like, Louis, you brought your crossbow.
Yeah.
Good. Let's all go back to the barn.
Yeah, that's a moment that really does work for me here.
Yeah, and I was chuckling at that last night.
But it is a wolf, and he makes it back. He makes it back to the shit farm.
Yes, where when he gets back to the farm, sneaking up behind him is the disgusting shit peasant with the axe, just clearly about to murder him. Like, so clearly about to behead him with this monstrous murder axe. But he doesn't see this. The peasant's behind him. What he does see is a wolf approaching, who then attacks and tackles peasant guy and kills this guy, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then Michelle Pfeiffer just appears.
Yeah. And you're like, Michelle Pfeiffer's in this movie. Where'd she come from?
Beautiful 80s Michelle Pfeiffer.
It is Michelle Pfeiffer in 1985. She's rocking this little pixie cut. She's in like a big black cloak in this scene. And, it's Michelle Pfeiffer in 1985. She's like stunning and captivating on camera. It's crazy how much presence she has, just like with her face just being in front of a camera.
Yeah.
Which is a really important part of this role, because something that we later kind of find out about her character is that everybody sort of finds her so captivating and so like overwhelmingly beautiful that she kind of inspires dramatic reactions in people. Yeah. Right? And I think that this is perfect. She's perfect casting for this role, because you look at this face and you're like, yeah, I kind of get why, someone would, summon Satan and curse people over this face.
Yeah, I think the film doesn't quite give her enough to do, but Agreed. What she does do is give her character this kind of ethereal presence that really works.
Yeah.
And this is where she this is the first time we see her, and she's apparently friends with this wolf.
Yeah.
And walks off into the woods after having this kind of, I don't remember exactly what she says says to Gaston.
He asks if he's dreaming, and she says, "You are."
Okay.
Yeah. They exchange some words before that, but yeah, he says, "I must be dreaming," and she says, "You are dreaming." And then she walks off with the wolf, and Broderick's reaction is essentially, "What the fuck is happening? I am so scared right now." And he's immediately like, "I want no part of this. I don't know where that lady came from. I don't know what the fuck this wolf's deal is, but I'm in way over my head here." So yeah, and then from there, it's the next day.
Navarre and Philippe are walking through the forest, and they stop for a rest.
Yes.
And this is when Philippe tells him about the woman that he met in the forest last night.
Right.
And Rutger's asking him questions.
Right.
And at this point, he does have the hawk again, and the hawk is sort of sitting on his arm, and he's looking at the hawk while he's asking questions to Philippe Gaston, and saying things like, "Oh, she sounds lovely. It would be so nice to hear her speak. I'd love to have a lady like that." While he's looking at the hawk.
Right.
And at this point, I'm thinking, Rutger Hauer wants to fuck that hawk.
and you're not wrong. It's just he just wishes he could he could turn her not into a hawk. Is the situation. Which I feel like this is as good a time as any to talk about really the central conceit of this movie, because we're talking about it sort of linear, and this won't be revealed for a little bit in the movie.
Right. And I didn't know this going in.
Yes.
So this whole time I have the idea that movie's called Ladyhawke.
Right.
So the lady's probably the hawk.
Yes.
But
what you didn't know is that an alternative title for this movie is Guy Wolf.
Yes.
Because Rutger Hauer is turning into a wolf at night. And we'll save why this is happening for a little bit later. But just for context, like anytime Broderick is in the daytime, Rutger Hauer's there and this hawk is there. And anytime Broderick is at night, Michelle Pfeiffer's there and the wolf is there, because Rutger Hauer is turning into the wolf at night and Michelle Pfeiffer is turning into the hawk during the day. Which I think you sort of, at least, I mean, I wasn't watching this movie for the first time, so you can let me know, David, but I feel like you definitely get as the viewer before it's actually revealed to you in the movie, right? That's what's happening.
Yeah. I got that impression too. So this is kind of the first scene where we've really had a chance to see Rutger Hauer act. I love Rutger Hauer.
He's great.
You love Rutger Hauer.
Yes.
How do we feel about Rutger Hauer in this movie?
Okay. I kind of want you to answer that question first.
Okay, that's fair.
How do you feel about Rutger Hauer in this movie?
He's the best part of the movie.
Yes. Okay.
I think he seems a little bit uncomfortable in the role, but I don't think that problem is exclusive to him in this movie.
Okay.
Because I also think, like, Broderick's a little uncomfortable in that role. He's a little bit miscast.
If not miscast, at least misused, right?
Yeah.
Misdeployed.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you said that Rutger Hauer was your favorite part of this movie, because I fucking love this performance. I think he is so good in this movie. There are so many moments where he's talking to the bird, and it is literally just Rutger Hauer and an animal, right? An animal, presumably, that Rutger Hauer had to be trained to handle in this movie. I assume that he didn't just already know how to handle birds of prey.
Yeah,
right?
I think he did. I think there was I think he did train with the hawks that were in this movie, and was interacting with them and working with them for a good portion of the runtime.
But yeah, so often on screen, he is just talking to a bird. And there are multiple times in this movie. There's one time specifically where he's talking, it's just Rutger Hauer, Dutch actor Rutger Hauer, talking to a bird. And I was crying. Like, tears were coming out of my eyes. And I'm like, it's such an affecting performance, because he plays so much here. He plays the really, really deep sadness that this guy is going through, and like the desperation, but also the rage, because he's kind of on this quest for revenge, which, by the way, we've already found out in the movie. We haven't talked about it yet, but Broderick's basically like, "What's your deal? what's actually, I think it's this scene actually, where he's basically like, what's your deal? Like, what do you need me for? And he's like, I have to kill somebody, right? And the mouse is like, who? And he's like, his grace, the Bishop of Aquila, right? So we find out here that Rutger Hauer's plan is to kill the bishop,
right?
Who's like the head honcho at Aquila, right? And I think he plays the revenge stuff so well, and the anger so well in this movie. And there's also just this deep sadness. He's got Rutger Hauer, those piercing blue eyes of his communicate so much emotion.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I just, anytime he's playing the, like, I'm so fucking sad that this is what my life is, it was always hitting for me this time.
Yeah. So obviously, Hauer's a Dutch actor. His Hollywood debut is 1981 in Nighthawks. And then, of course, he does Blade Runner in 82, which I would call his breakout role.
Yes.
If not for the fact that the movie was a colossal flop. But it's his most well-known role these days.
Right.
And I do feel like he's bringing a little bit of Roy Batty into the character of Navarre here.
Yeah.
And playing up the emotional aspects of the character. And, of course, has those piercing eyes. And that kind of, that wry smirk that he has as Batty, I think transfers over to Navarre a little bit here.
Yes, and he's also occasionally very funny in this movie, which I also appreciate.
And I think after this movie, he intentionally sought out smaller roles.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was related to this role or not, or the experience of working on this movie, but by the time he gets to the 90s, he's doing low-budget action movies, and that's kind of where his career mostly stays.
Yeah.
From here on out up until his untimely passing.
Man. I'm still so sad about that.
I am too.
I miss him.
I'm sad about every character actor I love dying.
But it just, like, this movie and this performance specifically being so kind of formative for me, watching this movie so much as a kid. And also Blade Runner was big for me when I was like a teen, right? It just... He specifically loomed, I think, very, very large in the media that I enjoyed as a kid, just between those two roles. Like, I feel like his particular style, his like oeuvre, was something that really kind of informed the art that I enjoy and the type of performances I enjoy now. So I'm probably a little biased when I'm talking about how much I like him in this movie because of that. But yeah, what a loss. Anyway. So yeah, here we also find out that in addition to him saying like, oh, I want to kill this bishop, right? We also find out that Rutger Hauer... So Rutger Hauer in this movie has the biggest sword of all time.
He has two swords.
Yes.
He has the long sword, which is huge. And I think he has a shorter sword that does kind of look a little fake.
Yes.
It does kind of look like high school theater production sword.
Right. Yes, but the big sword, the huge like claymore style sword that he's got here, we get a little information about in this scene, and there's a bunch of jewels in the sword. He's like, one of them is his like family. It's like a jewel that's been passed down in his family. It like represents their lineage or whatever. And there's like a jewel in the sword that his father put there. It's his father's sword, he says. And then there's an empty spot, and he says that's mine to fill. Right. So we learn that this sword is very important to him, and that it has a lot of like meaning. For him, right? Which is not super important, but it does sort of come back. Also, here we find out that he has only been banished, and this was a big surprise to me because I did not remember this from my previous watches of this movie as like a teen. He was only banished 2 years ago.
I didn't remember that.
So this hawk wolf thing that's going on, which is made out to be something that is like super, super tragic and like really tearing Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer apart inside, has been going on for 2 years, which is not a short amount of time to be separated from somebody that you love. But also I'm like, 2 years and we're already like fully on like the murder quest here. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it maybe like 8, 9, 10 years maybe would have been having given a little bit more emotional weight here. I was like, I don't know, 2 years, man. Like, maybe try something else first before you're like, I gotta storm the castle and murder this guy.
Yeah, I'm wondering what he was up to
for those 2 years.
For those 2 years before he decided, you know what? I kind of don't like turning into a wolf at night.
Yeah, it does beg the question, what have they been doing for 2 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the scene where he talks about his sword, because I forgot to put it down in my notes. But that is one of the better scenes in the movie to me. It's a great moment that establishes his character really well, and I just love a guy on a quest. Yes. I do love a guy on a quest.
Yes, and I feel like you and I are both suckers for like, this is my father's sword.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that appeals to like the lizard brain in me.
Yeah. It is very like a kind of traditional masculine representation in cinema of like a guy with a big sword and a quest.
Yeah.
That we're just like, ooga booga, caveman brain activated.
Right.
But yeah, so then from there, it's nighttime again. And Broderick wants to leave in the previous scene with Rutger Hauer. We should say this. So he learns that Rutger Hauer wants to kill the priest. And he's immediately like, I don't want any fucking part of this. I'm not going back to Aquila, because we learned that the reason that Rutger Hauer saved the mouse, Philippe Gaston, is that he wants Philippe to smuggle him back into Aquila.
Yes, he Rutger Hauer says, "You will be my guiding angel."
Yes.
And it's very funny that he's saying this to Ferris Bueller.
Yes. Yes. Before he's Ferris Bueller. Proto Ferris Bueller.
Yes.
But yeah, so Broderick's basically like, no, fuck you. I don't want anything to do with you and your weird wolf lady who shows up at night. And starts walking away. And Rutger Hauer throws this fucking massive sword, this like fucking 5.5-foot sword, just hurls it, and it sticks into a tree like right next to Broderick.
That was a great moment.
Yes, and Broderick's like, never mind, I guess I'll stay.
That moment did get a laugh out of me.
Yes. And so then the next scene, Broderick is tied to a tree, and it's nighttime, and Michelle Pfeiffer's back. And Broderick is basically talking to her and being like, hey, would you please untie me? The bishop's guards came and tied me up. And she's like, she kind of thinks that maybe he's lying. He's sort of doing a little bit of a flirtatious thing with her here, which he does in a lot of his scenes with her, where he's like, please, would you untie me? I'm look at me. I'm 1985 Matthew Broderick. I'm just a little guy. I'm so cute. And she's like, yeah, fine, I'll fucking untie you. And so she cuts him loose, and he like immediately starts running off and is like, thanks. Give the captain my regards or whatever. And she's like, he's gonna fucking kill me. So it's like a fun, cute little moment with them. And yeah, so she cuts him loose, but then Broderick gets captured here when he's on the run, right?
Yes,
he is running away from Navarre, and because Pfeiffer has cut him loose.
Yeah, the next morning, Philippe Gaston gets caught by the guards, and then the guards also ambush Navarre.
Yes.
And we have this sequence where he tries to fight them back.
Yeah, there's a little battle here.
They shoot the hawk with the crossbow.
Yes, they both get shot. So Navarre gets shot and the hawk gets shot. And the hawk gets kind of shot in the shoulder near the wing, right? And starts falling out of the sky, which is really sad. And this is the first moment. So basically, Rutger Hauer, after the hawk gets shot, deals with the rest of the guards, right?
Yes.
And he has this moment where the hawk's on the ground and he like goes over to her and is like cradling this hawk in his arms. Mm-hmm. And this is the first moment where I cried in this movie.
I was very sad that they shot the hawk.
Yes, because he's talking to her and again, such a good performance from Rutger Hauer, because he is just holding a bird. And he's doing this thing where he's like, oh, it's going to be all right. I'm going to take care of you. Like, just hold on. Right. And it's like, it's so affecting. And I was crying. So then he has also been shot. Navarre has been shot.
Yes.
And because of that, he sends Matthew Broderick with the bird to this monastery. He's basically like, I know who can help. Take the bird to this place. He'll know what to do.
And he threatens that he will hunt him down if he fails.
Yes,
which I think becomes a recurring thing. I think there's multiple times where Rutger Hauer threatens to hunt down and kill Matthew Broderick.
Yes, which again, Rutger Hauer looks the coolest anyone has ever looked in this movie. He is goth zaddy with an enormous sword and the biggest black horse you've ever seen. And if this guy said he was going to hunt you down, I would be so fucking scared.
I would too.
So basically the vibe is, save this bird or I will fucking kill you. and sends Matthew Broderick off with his horse, right? And there's a great moment here. Broderick is like going to this monastery that he's been sent to. There's this great moment here where Rutger Hauer has his sword stuck in, and it looks like a cross. His sword is stuck in the dirt, and he just says, "Please," and it's just such a beautiful little moment.
It's framed so well.
Yes.
It's a great shot.
I think this is a really good moment actually to just talk about how beautiful this movie
is. This movie looks fucking great.
It looks so good. There is so much good landscape photography in this movie. We're shooting this, I think a lot of it is on location in Italy.
Yes.
And it is gorgeous.
Yes.
It's just beautiful Italian countryside. And so if for no other reason, I would recommend watching this movie, even if you're like not a big fan of fantasy or whatever. I would say this movie is worth watching just because it looks fucking incredible.
Yeah.
It's so pretty to look at.
I think this movie looks really, really, really good.
Mm.
They use a lot of, they're shooting at castles, they're shooting in the Italian countryside, they're shooting in the cold and the rain and the mud, and you feel it. I rented this on Amazon Prime.
Yep.
And the only version that's available on Amazon Prime is a standard edition.
And it
looks...
Or the standard definition.
It looks like dog shit. And it is dog shit.
It looked fucking awful.
It's
I was so disappointed at this, because it's like, this would look great on in like a high def resolution.
I need like a Blu-ray of this, because it is a damn shame. So I watched this movie last night for the first time in a long time, and I spoiler alert, I fucking loved it. And we'll get to our actual like judgment on it at the end, but I loved watching this movie. And my biggest takeaway from watching this last night is that it is a damn shame that the easiest way to watch this movie is on a standard def Amazon digital rental that looks like complete garbage, right? And I need to just purchase this on a good looking disc.
Well, I'm sure even like a standard def DVD disc would look better than this fucking Amazon rip.
It looks so bad. And it was like, really, it was distracting me at points from the movie that I was otherwise very much enjoying, because I was like, if anything's not in the immediate foreground of the shot, you're like losing all the detail.
Yeah.
And it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Anyway, so fuck you, Amazon.
Jeff, if you're listening, eat shit.
Eat shit, Jeff. Bezos. To be clear, not any other Jeffs at Amazon.
You know what? Fuck all the Jeffs at Amazon.
No. I don't think we can say that. I'm sure that there's some delivery driver named Jeff, probably many delivery drivers named Jeff, who are just trying to earn a paycheck for their families and are being exploited by one of the shittiest companies in the world. So I'm gonna say we are pro Jeffs at Amazon. We are anti Jeff Bezos specifically.
I don't know. I've never met any good Jeffs.
All right. Well, I feel I am obligated here to say that my father-in-law's name is Jeff, and that is one Jeff that I'm ardently pro. The podmaster is not enjoying this. She might bleep or cut this entirely. We'll figure that out. Anyway,
so now we meet Imperius.
Yes,
the monk Imperius.
Okay,
the little shit, another shit person in this movie.
Yes, I love Leo McKern's performance as Imperius, who is the monk that Gaston takes the hawk to. He's a drunken monk, and he's got the graveliest voice I've ever heard. He's like, he sounds like, this is medieval era. It sounds like he has been smoking 2 packs of like Marlboro Blacks for like 3 decades. It's hilarious.
Yeah, he's great. I think he was a theater actor.
Yes, another big theater guy in this movie.
He's another one who's just bringing it.
And he's really doing a character in this.
Yes.
Yeah, and it rules.
It's a comedic performance, but he's also putting a lot of thought behind the character and delivering. There's a few really good moments with the character.
Yeah, he's got some real emotional heft in this role, in addition to being comic relief, which is his primary function. But there's a great moment here when Matthew Broderick shows up with the bird at the monastery, and we meet Imperius for the first time, and he's like, Broderick is like, I've got a bird here, and he's like, oh, bring it in, we'll have ourselves a meal or whatever, and he's like, we can't eat this bird. Imperious's response is, "Oh God, is it Lent again already?" which I fucking lost it. I love that moment. It's so good. But yeah, he's fucking drunk off his ass. And is like, oh, I guess if we can't eat this bird, like, fuck off.
He really wants to make some hawk chicken wings.
Yeah, and then Broderick basically says something where, like, he basically is like, Navarre sent me. He said you would know what to do. And he's like, oh, fuck, I gotta help this bird. Right? So he lets him in and takes the bird in and is, like, tending to her or whatever. And he says, we have to wait a little bit. He says to the bird. He's talking to the bird like it's a person. Right? Which Broderick is still like, I'm not sure what the fuck's going on with that. But he's like, we have to wait a little bit. The arrow is still in the hawk, right? And he kind of leaves her in a little safe, cozy spot in his monastery. And then Broderick breaks in.
And discovers that the hawk has turned into naked Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yes, and reacts how you would in that situation where he's like, and then we have a scene basically where Broderick, fully having realized that Michelle Pfeiffer is the hawk. He's kind of witnessed, not witnessed the transformation, but seen that the hawk was there and now it's the lady, right? He's like, I think I have a Ladyhawke situation on my hands. Then he's having a conversation with Imperius where Broderick has put together the other half of it, right?
Yes.
Where he says that's him, isn't it, when he hears the wolf howling. And he means the wolf out there that I'm hearing and that I've been seeing every night. That's Navarre, isn't it? And the monk affirms that. He's like, yeah, it is.
And Imperius tells the story of how the bishop used to be in love with Isabeau, and Navarre was the captain of the bishop's guard, and then Navarre and Isabeau fell in love and escaped, and the bishop made a deal with Satan to put this curse on them.
Yes, which I had forgotten. This was another thing I had forgotten in this movie. I remembered the bishop's curse. I forgot that it is explicitly stated in the movie that the bishop called upon the powers of Satan to curse Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie, which is honestly kind of hardcore. It's like, I was like, oh, this movie has more balls than I remembered, where it's like, no, yeah, this guy who is running the church is like in league with the devil, which is pretty crazy. And then also there's a line around here when Broderick is having his little scene with Michelle Pfeiffer. I just wanted to call this out because the script is a little uneven. There's some moments that I think work better than others, but when this script works, I think it really works. There's a few poetic moments. I think we called out one where Rutger Hauer is talking about his sword. There's another kind of poetic line here that I really liked, where Matthew Broderick says to her after he's realized that she transformed from a hawk into a person, he says, "Are you flesh or are you spirit?" And her response is, "I am sorrow." And I was like, oh, that really fucking worked for me. Like, that kind of hit me really hard watching it this time. And Michelle Pfeiffer sells the shit out of it, and I just thought it was like an important thing to call out, that there's some poetry in the script that I think kind of works.
Yeah, and again, the curse is that Isabeau is a hawk during the day and a woman at night.
Yeah.
And Navarre is a man during the day, but a wolf at night.
Yes.
Did I say that without screwing it up?
You did, yes.
Okay.
And that's how Imperius explains it when, again, he is telling Matthew Broderick the plot of the movie he's in. He's like, Matthew Broderick, you found yourself in the movie called Ladyhawke. And here's the situation. This is what the plot of this movie is.
So there is a lot of poetry in this fact that they are together, but they can't really be together the way that they want to.
Yes.
I'm also not sure how conscious they are of their actions when they are animals.
The priest actually does address that. He basically says that they don't remember their human lives when they're animals.
Okay.
Right? So that's another kind of added element to the tragedy here, is that when he's the wolf and she's the hawk, I think the animals understand that they kind of have an allegiance to that person, right? But they don't remember their human lives. Right, so they're only living a half-life. It's referred to as a half-life a few times in the movie, right? Because they're only really living half of the time.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very sad. And there's a moment at sunrise and sunset, right when both of them are transforming. There's like a fraction of a second, the priest says, when they're both human at the same time, and it's long enough for them to be reminded of each other, but never long enough to touch. And that's so tragic. It's so sad.
It's very mythic and folkloric. It reminds me of folktale that you would hear.
Yes, and I think the strongest part of this movie's script is this invention. I think that this is really what works in this movie.
Yeah, I wish the script. I agree. Maybe a little bit. I think the script is maybe more uneven than you think it is.
Yeah.
For me personally, but I agree. I think it's a really strong element here that I wish was just maybe in a slightly better movie.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which we'll get to a little bit as we continue through the podcast.
Yeah.
That's why you're listening to it.
Fair enough, but also fuck you. This movie's great.
Okay.
But anyway, so so we learn the plot. Oh, we also there's one additional detail here that we have to call out in the monk's exposition dump, where he basically lets Broderick know that a priest who both Navarre and Isabeau confessed to told the bishop of their love.
Right.
He broke confession and which is like a big sin in the Catholic Church. He can't do that. He told the bishop while he was drunk. This priest was drunk and told the bishop, oh, Navarre's in love with Isabeau and she's in love with him and they plan to run away together, basically. And that is how the bishop knew and the reason that the bishop cursed them. And obviously, it's really obvious even when he's saying it, and Broderick basically immediately puts it together. He's like, you're the drunk priest who told the bishop. So we learn here that Imperius is partially tending to Isabeau's wounds out of a feeling of immense guilt because it's his fault that this has happened to them. So that's another just important detail here. So from there, so they pull the arrow out and kind of bandage Isabeau up. She's going to live. She's going to be fine. And we move from here to the priest and Alfred Molina in this movie.
Molina, who just shows up in this movie. Again.
This is only his third film role.
Looking like a disgusting pig man.
Yes, he is almost nonverbal in this movie. And yeah, he looks like a Neanderthal.
He's a wolf hunter.
Yes.
Who's hired by the bishop to hunt down
yes.
Navarre's wolf form.
Yes, his name is Cesar.
He has this big ass unibrow.
Yes.
And you just know this man smells like shit.
He looks disgusting.
Which is my favorite kind of movie character, I should say. I love a movie character that you just know smells like shit.
Yes.
24/7.
No, yeah, he's fully. This is like level 10 filth on this man. But yeah, so the priest summons Cesar, who is Alfred Molina's character, and he's like, "Hey, disgusting shit, man. I need you to hunt down a wolf, right?" And he's like, well, that's what I fucking do. And he's like, basically like, to find the wolf that I want, look for this woman. And he basically describes Michelle Pfeiffer, right? And he's like, the wolf that I want you to kill is with her. So we find out that the priest here, knowing that Navarre has returned, right, and is around again, is basically like, I'm just going to end this, right?
Right.
I cursed him. That clearly wasn't enough because they're back. So I'm just gonna kill him as a wolf. Easier than killing him as a guy, I guess. So that's his plan. And he says, I just think it's a very funny, again, just John Wood, who plays the priest, just chewing scenery in this scene. When he's talking to Alfred Molina, he's like describing Michelle Pfeiffer, and he's like, and her name is Isabeau. And he makes it like 3 full syllables with like a period between each one. And then Alfred Molina, I think his only line in this movie is Isabeau. Which he responds back just, I guess, to indicate that he did in fact comprehend the words that were just spoken at him. But yeah, and he also, John Wood in this scene is like, there will be a wolf with her, the wolf who loves her. And it's just, I just love his like crazy over the top way of speaking. It just rules. So now we have Cesar the Wolf Hunter on their trail. Before we get to like a confrontation with Cesar, the monastery is actually attacked first.
Yes,
right?
the monastery is attacked by the guards.
Yes.
And Imperius is kind of, let me also just say, this monastery looks like shit.
Oh yeah,
like,
it's bad shit.
This is a rundown, broken ass monastery.
Also with apparently one monk living in it. Like,
Yeah.
it looks like Imperius has exiled himself into the worst monastery in Italy. And is just living there by himself, drinking constantly, and really not devoting any time or resources to the upkeep of this place whatsoever. Yeah.
But he has rigged it with traps.
Yes, I love that it is a Home Alone monastery.
Yeah.
Where he just has fucking booby traps.
There's this rope bridge that he can break this rope bridge that collapses.
Yes.
When the guards are charging up it. There's a larger wooden bridge that has a specific spot on it that has these broken boards.
Yes, and
it's alluded to earlier in the movie,
right,
where he tells Broderick, "Don't step there."
Yes, walk on the left side. Yeah.
And at this point during the attack, one of the guards steps on that side and falls through, and I think Imperius yells out, like, "You should have walked on the left."
Yeah, he sticks his head in the hole that the guy fell through and goes, "Walk on the left side," which, believe it or not,
it's almost like a Monty Python bit.
Yes, believe
it
or not,
very holy grail.
Believe it or not, when I was about 8 and my brother was about 10, we said that shit to each other so much that I'm sure my mom wanted to end her life. Because she was probably so tired of hearing my brother and I be like, "Walk on the left side." But yeah, funny little moment here with the booby-trapped monastery. And then, so at this point, Isabeau and Mouse, I keep using different names for him.
Yeah,
he's Mouse, he's Philippe Gaston, he's Matthew Broderick.
He's got so many names.
Yeah, anyway.
You know what I mean.
But he and Isabeau are running away from the guards as, Imperius is setting off his booby traps. But there's too many guards, and some of them slip past Imperius and are on, chasing after Pfeiffer and Broderick. And they get to the top of a tower and are kind of cornered by this guard. And Michelle Pfeiffer is like falling off the tower.
Yeah, but before that, there is another fun bit where the guard is kind of just breaking through the trap door at the top of the tower, and Broderick kicks it back down. So then the guard sticks his sword through the door. I like that a bit, which causes Broderick to sort of jump back, and he knocks Isabeau off the tower.
And so she's
just as the sun is rising.
Right, she's falling off the tower. He's holding on, but he can't hold on because he's tiny, skinny, frail Matthew Broderick, and his tiny little noodle arms can't hold up Michelle Pfeiffer. So she slips out of his grasp, but again, it is just as the sun is rising. Really, really convenient sunrise timing here, because it doesn't actually look like she had that far to fall. It looks like it was probably like 30 or 40 feet. Like, she probably would have hit the ground pretty quick, but the sun happens to rise at that exact moment, and she turns into a bird, and she can fly. So she does not fall to her death.
And there's no transformation effects in this movie or anything,
which I think is a strong choice.
Yes. I don't think they would have been able to pull it off effectively, but what they do is a lot of like close-ups of like the hawk's eye or the wings or something, and they sort of fade in and out between these images for the transformation.
Yes, and I think it's effective. I think it gives you as the viewer an understanding of like, okay, this is the transformation happening, without them having to like do all the effects for it, and risk them looking not good, right? But also I think it kind of fits the sort of romantic fairy tale style of the movie, right? Where it kind of reminds me of like, pictures in a picture book, right? As I think it's kind of a fun way of showing this kind of fairy tale magic. Right. So yeah, she's fine. And then from there, they then go to a tavern, right?
Well, Rutger Hauer.
Oh, Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer appears because it's daytime now, so he's in his Rutger Hauer form.
Yes, and he shoots a couple guys, I think, with his double-barreled crossbow.
And they fall off the tower.
Yes.
There's one that falls off the tower, and that's a solid fucking dummy.
Right.
That's a good-looking dummy that falls off this tower.
Yeah.
I think we see it like hit the ground.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. No, this guy really falls.
He really gets it.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, we do. I think we do make it to the tavern. Imperius tells Navarre that he needs to confront the bishop in the church while he hears the clergy's confession.
Yes.
In 3 days' time, because there will be day without night and night without day.
Yes.
And Navarre is like, "You're fucking drunk. Shut up."
This is a very funny moment to me, by the way. Like, this is one of the... I will concede that this is one of the moments that shows the script's weakness, because it is very funny that not 10 minutes ago in this movie, Imperius has this conversation with Broderick where he's basically like, oh, it's so tragic and their lives are always going to be like this and it's all my fault and I feel so guilty and this fucking sucks. Isn't this the saddest thing you've ever heard? And then like 10 minutes later, with no additional like moment with Imperius where you see him learn this information in between, he's just like, oh, actually I totally know how you can break this curse, and if you just listen to me, everything will be totally fine in 3 days. It's just very funny that he excluded that information earlier, I guess for dramatic effect. And then as soon as Navarre shows up, he's like, yeah, I just told your like tragic sob story to this guy and, you know, made him feel really bad about it, but actually I think it's gonna be fine.
Yeah. And the thing about he can't kill the bishop or they'll stay cursed forever.
Right.
I don't think that's how curses work. I'm not a curse expert, but that doesn't seem like that's how that works.
Well, we have to remember here that in the world of this movie, the Christian God and Christian devil are the forces at play here.
That's
right?
true.
And so I think the idea here, because Imperius does say that God revealed to him how the curse can be broken.
Okay.
Right? Which is essentially in 3 days' time, there's going to be, like David said, a night without day and a day without night, where if Isabeau and Navarre confront the bishop at the same time, in that moment, the curse will be broken, right? And apparently God has revealed this to the priest. So I think we just have to assume that, because this is God and Satan that we're dealing with here, that if you kill the guy who cursed you, that's like an act of wrath and it's sinful and therefore the curse wouldn't be broken or whatever, right? Is my assumption. I think they have to like be nicer about it than that. Because God's like, I don't know, you can't defeat evil with evil or some shit. But yeah, so Imperius is very much like, don't kill him, you got to do this instead. And Navarre's like, fuck you, you're crazy and drunk, I'm gonna kill this guy. That's the whole reason that I'm in this movie. So yeah, from there, we're then at the tavern with and it's nighttime again, so it is Pfeiffer and Broderick at this tavern. He steals her some clothes. Well, he's in there with her as a bird first, and then he steals her some clothes and she turns into a lady and changes into the clothes. They have a little cute moment here where they he's again being a little flirty with her, but it kind of reads as like very much like they're building a friendship here to me.
Yes.
And she also is like lonely because she's only a human at night and the love of her life is not around. So they have a little dance, and it's kind of a cute and charming moment that I like.
You're gonna hate what I have written down.
Oh, okay.
This is gonna date the podcast.
Yeah.
To if God willing, we make this podcast last for 100 episodes or whatever, and you come back and you listen to episode 2, just know that we are recording this in August of 2023.
Yeah. And
I have written down the words, "Baby Mouse rizzed up Ladyhawke. Is he the new Riz King?"
You fucking rat bastard. You son of a bitch.
So
you motherfucker.
Yeah. So they dance, and there is this nice moment where she asks Gaston what Navarre said about her.
Yeah.
Because again, when they're in their animal forms, they don't know what they aren't aware of what's going on.
Right.
So Philippe kind of has to play telephone between these two people, like they're high school crushes.
And this is a thing that happens. We won't call it out every time, and it's happened before this scene already, where he's kind of communicating messages to the other one on behalf of the one who was human either in the night or the day prior, right? But this is a thing where anytime he says something to one of them, it's something that we didn't actually see the other one say, right? So when he communicates a message from Navarre to Isabeau, it's never something that we actually saw Rutger Hauer say, and vice versa, right? When he says the stuff that Pfeiffer is saying to Navarre, it's not stuff that we're seeing Isabeau say, right? And I think that this is kind of a fun, positive aspect of Philippe's character as kind of this little criminal rapscallion scamp, because I think he's making shit up. I don't think it's just that it's off screen, right? I think he's straight up making stuff up to that he knows is going to make them feel good,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's what he's doing too.
Right. He's trying to keep both of them. He's trying to keep both of their spirits up. He's trying to keep both of them hopeful and believing, right, that they're going to be together someday. And he is kind of doing like a Cyrano de Bergerac thing where he's like dressing up and making poetic the feelings that he already kind of knows that each of them have, right? Because he can tell when he's talking to Navarre how much he loves Isabeau. And he can tell when he's talking to Isabeau how much she loves Navarre. And even though they aren't talking about it in the flowery, poetic terms that then he passes the message along in, right? I think what he's trying to do is tap into the love that he's seeing and put it into the words that he knows they're going to want to hear.
Yes.
Which I think is kind of like a really cute and sweet thing about his character.
I think so. And at this point, they have established that Philippe and Navarre are trusting each other a little bit more.
Yeah.
Philippe has decided to name Isabeau's hawk form Ladyhawke. That's where we get the title of the film from. And Rutger Hauer specifically entrusts him with caring for Ladyhawke.
Yes.
While he's in his wolf form.
Yeah, which really tells you a lot about how far Navarre has come in this relationship. Because before he was like, I'm gonna fucking throw a sword at you so that you don't run away from me or whatever. And now he's like, this is the most important person in the world to me, and she is your responsibility. So
and he's really and Philippe's really taking that on and owning it.
Yeah, and it's some nice little character growth for both of them.
And until suddenly we're interrupted by
Melina.
Shitty Alfred Molina. Alfred Molina's a lovely person, I'm sure.
Yes.
His character's very shitty.
Yes, he stinks like shit.
He stinks like poo-poo.
In this movie, in real life, I'm sure the man smells very nice.
And he's got a little black pointy hat on that I like very much in this scene.
Okay, and so they like go outside of the barn to like go get a drink or whatever, and he's like right there with a bunch of wolf pelts on his horse, and Pfeiffer immediately starts screaming, and Broderick's like, go back inside, and he's like threatening. Broderick is threatening Cesar. He's like, get the fuck out of here, like leave us alone. And Molina here just goes, Isabeau. Because he hears Broderick say her name. And it's just, again, he only has like 3 lines in this movie and all 3 of them are Isabeau, but I just love his delivery. Because it is just fully like this disgusting swamp creature character. So now they know essentially that someone has identified her.
Yes.
Right.
Isabeau, I think she gets onto Cesar's horse.
She gets onto...
Oh, no, she gets onto Goliath.
Yeah, Goliath.
Yes,
because,
and escapes into the woods.
Yeah. So yes, Pfeiffer rides off basically because now she is worried. She's put this together and she's like, this guy has a bunch of wolf pelts. He just recognized who I am. And ergo, Navarre in wolf form is in danger. This guy's here to kill Navarre, is what she has put together. So she rides after him to stop him, and Broderick's like chasing after her on foot. And so they go into the woods, and Cesar has set up a bunch of wolf traps in the woods.
Yeah, essentially bear traps.
Yes.
But they're a little bit smaller.
Yeah, they're like the little ones that clamp together with the teeth.
Yes.
On the ground. And so he set those up. He's trying to trap Navarre. A wolf comes up. He thinks it's Navarre, and it gets, I think, trapped and injured or killed. And Pfeiffer has a big reaction here where she like screams seeing that this has happened. And then the actual Navarre shows up. And Cesar's like, oh, a black wolf or whatever. He like recognizes that this is actually the wolf that he wants to kill. And then here we have the one of 2 good deaths, really, really good deaths in this movie.
Isabeau kicks him in the fucking head.
Yes.
And he falls into a trap, and the trap closes in on his neck, and he bleeds to death.
Yes, Molina gets wolf trapped fully just like all the way around his head.
And this is ostensibly a kids movie.
Yes.
So we do see we don't get a super gory scene, but we do see some gore. We do see some blood of like the prong on that trap, like entering his neck as it closes around him.
Yeah, and there's a really good shot. So this scene is at night, and there's like a thunderstorm going on. So there's like flashes of lightning lighting this scene, and there is a really good and I think a shot that slightly traumatized me as a child and was like seared into my memory that I remembered very, very well from this scene, where there's like a flash of lightning, and it's kind of like a pseudo wide shot on Molina like laying on the ground with the trap on his head, and he's just like twitching and spasming because like the spike is like in his brain or whatever. And it's not super gory, but it fucking rules.
Yeah, it's a solid ass death.
It's really good.
I didn't expect it at this point in the movie, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so Alfred Molina gets it in this movie. He's in this movie for 5 minutes. He has 3 lines, all of which are Isabeau, and then he gets a wolf trap to the head and fucking is immediately gone. And it rules. It's very good. So anyway, then after this kind of dramatic night, then the next morning, Rutger Hauer is back in human form, catching a fish with his bare hands.
Yeah, he's crossbow fishing.
Oh, is he using a crossbow?
He's using the crossbow.
Oh, I missed that.
So
okay.
we are actually recording 2 podcasts today.
Yes.
And the next film we'll be talking about also features bow fishing at one point.
That's true.
But this
That's
one,
the commonality.
but we have a crossbow in this one, and we have a bow and arrow in the next one.
Yeah. So yeah, he's catching a fish with his crossbow, and he is kind of caring for Philippe. He's like, you seemed really pale. Here's some food, and being kind of nice to him. And there's kind of a funny moment here where Rutger Hauer, I think, is intentionally kind of fucking with him, where he's like, what happened last night? And Philippe's like, oh, like basically nothing eventful. We went to a tavern, because he's trying to cover up the fact that like Isabeau was in danger, because he doesn't want Navarre to get mad. And he's like, you took her to a tavern? And he's like, well, no, I mean, just like, and just to like change clothes or whatever. And he's like, you changed clothes together? And he's like, no, of course not with her. Like, I left her alone for that. And he's like, oh, you left her alone? And it's just very funny, because it's like kind of Rutger Hauer, like knowing that Philippe is scared of him and kind of like messing with him a little bit. I see this as kind of him like prodding him a little bit.
And I think this is also the point when Philippe is basically like, yeah, your hot girlfriend is really hot. And yes. I do kind of want to bang her.
Right.
But I also know that she loves you.
Yeah. He does. They do have a very like bro to bro conversation where he's like, man, like, I'm not gonna say I haven't thought about it, but she's all yours, dude. Which is like, all right, like, let's give Michelle Pfeiffer a little bit more agency in this movie, but also,
And also, I would not say that to Rutger Hauer.
Oh, absolutely not.
I would not say that to Rutger Hauer's face.
Goth Zaddy,
no way.
Goth Zaddy Rutger Hauer, absolutely not. I would keep that shit to myself. But I will say Rutger Hauer's reaction to this from Broderick is pretty like positive. He seems kind of like happy that that Broderick has been open with him about this, where he's like, yeah, she's beautiful and like she's very charming and she loves you a lot, right? And Rutger Hauer kind of seems to like appreciate that in this moment.
And I think it's another one of those moments where he just likes hearing about her.
Yes.
He just likes hearing about someone talk about her.
Yes.
Because he can't have that experience with her.
Right. And so hearing about how beautiful and charming Broderick finds her, he kind of is like living vicariously through him a little bit. And I think he even says here, he's like, every moment that you spend with her, like, I envy you.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, it's again, so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad. So yeah, we have that little moment, and then the monk, rather.
Yeah, Imperious.
Imperious shows back up. He's been following them. He's been tailing them since the monastery, trying to get them to fucking listen to him and go with his plan, right? And Broderick is on board with his plan at this point. So Imperious shows back up, and in the nighttime, because Rutger Hauer has blown Imperious off, Imperious is basically like, Broderick and Imperious are basically like, well, if we can't win over Rutger Hauer, we got to win over Michelle Pfeiffer, right? We got to get Isabeau on board, because at least then, for half the day we can be planning how to break this curse. So it's nighttime, and Michelle Pfeiffer is there, and Broderick's like, we think we know a way to break the curse, and she's like, who's we? You and Navarre? And he's like, no. And Imperious shows up, and he's like, the two of us, right? And so they get Isabeau on board to break the curse. And their plan to kind of get Navarre on board is to like trap him as a wolf, right? And then have the moment of transformation be between Isabeau and Navarre in that split second of sunrise, right, where they're both human, so that he can like see her and be reminded of her and maybe be a little bit more motivated to break the curse instead of just like go and kill the priest.
Yes.
Right.
So they're digging this hole in the ground that they're going to trap his wolf form in.
Yes. And before he actually can be trapped in the pit, he's like on his way across this frozen lake, and he falls into the ice. And so then they have to rescue... I did think this scene was kind of funny to watch when you think about them filming it, because Navarre falls through the ice in wolf form. So it's just a wet dog. It's literally just a dog in like a pool, right, that they're shooting, or maybe an actual lake. It might have been on location, but so it's like all these shots of this wet dog swimming, right, and then Matthew Broderick like climbs into the water to try and like get Navarre out in wolf form. But what's actually happening here is it's just Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick wrestling with a wet dog. Which I thought was very funny to think about the filming process of it. Because it's not a puppet, it's just an actual dog, or an actual wolf, really. They were using real wolves, like trained wolves. So it's just very funny to think about Broderick and Pfeiffer just wrestling a wet wolf. So they rescue him and get him out of the ice. But in the process, he kind of claws up Matthew Broderick's chest, right? And then they get him into the little hole that they dug, and Michelle Pfeiffer's in there as well. Sunrise comes, and we have the second time I cried in this movie, which is Sunrise and Navarre turning into a human at the same time that Isabeau is turning into a hawk. And there's that split second where they can see each other but not touch, just like Imperius said. And then Isabeau turns into a hawk and flies away. And Rutger Hauer lets out this like animalistic howl. Yeah. That is so heart-wrenching. It's so sad.
And I think he has like fake wolf teeth in and like contacts wolf to make contacts. His eyes. It's a nice moment. I think it is a little cheesy and undercut by that kind of 80s editing style that we have back then with like the dissolves and stuff. I don't exactly remember how it plays out, but that's what I did have written down. But I think it is a good moment.
I respect your feelings on it. I respectfully disagree. I think it's one of the strongest moments of this movie. Yeah. It just really, really works for me. So Navarre is kind of reinvigorated with his desire to be back with Isabeau from this, but he really hasn't been swayed from like, I'm just gonna go fucking kill this person.
Yeah, he still is really dead set on killing this bishop.
Yeah, so their plan kind of didn't work. Yeah. And so they this is when we enter the final act of this movie, right? So they show up at Aquila, and Navarre's plan is still very much, I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna kill this guy. So they sneak in at night, and Navarre is in wolf form again.
Yeah. So Philippe sneaks into Aquila back through the sewers.
Yes.
The same way that he escaped at the beginning of the movie. And Imperius and Isabeau pretend that they've like caught the wolf in the back of Imperius's wagon. Yeah. And they're going to sneak it in through the gate.
Yes, and that the wolf is a gift for the bishop.
Yes.
And there's a fun moment here with the guard where Imperius is like talking to me. He's like, "Oh, it's a gift for the bishop." And the guard here outside is like, "Oh, I've never gotten to kill a wolf before." And he's like about to like stab Navarre. And Imperius is like, "Oh, funny coincidence. That's exactly what the bishop said. But I'm sure he would understand you depriving him of the pleasure. He's a very forgiving sort of man."
Yeah.
And this guard's like, "Oh, fuck." And decides not to kill this wolf because he doesn't want the bishop to have him hung like all those motherfuckers we saw at the beginning of this movie.
So Philippe has made it back into the castle through under the sewers.
Yeah. And
he's sort of climbed up that same shaft that is under the church.
Right.
And there's this fun little moment where a guy steps out on the grate again, and Philippe starts poking him in the foot with a dagger. And at this point, church has started, and the bishop and the clergy have entered.
Yeah, and the bishop is here, we have heard, to hear confession.
Yes.
That's what they're doing.
Yes. And we kind of cut back to Navarre and Imperius, and of course Isabeau is in her hawk form again.
Yeah.
And Navarre has asked Imperius to kill Isabeau if he fails, and the signal is going to be the ringing of the church bell.
Yes, I do think it's funny that Navarre has completely just ignored any possibility of breaking the curse and is like, murder-suicide mission.
Yeah.
I'm going in, I'm killing this bishop, I'm probably going to die doing it, and if I die, fucking kill this hawk. who is also the woman that I love. And he's just like, just make it quick or whatever, which I'm like, he can't talk to her about this.
Right.
So it is a little weird that he's just like, I have made the executive decision that you are going to die if I'm dead. Right. It's like, well, what if she wanted to, I don't know, live her night life as a lady who turns into a hawk during the day? Like, it's not all about you, dude. I don't know. But he seems very confident. He's like, this is what she will want.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want to live this way, which, like, to be fair, it is kind of a cursed life to be living. So I don't know how much she would or wouldn't want to be living this way. I just thought it was funny that he made the decision for her.
Yeah, it is a funny. Maybe they've already had the conversation at some point. Like, if there's a point of no return type situation,
right,
this is the plan.
But they can't have had that conversation because they can't talk to each other.
That's true.
So do you think
me.
You think that before the curse happened, they were like, hey, if there's ever a hypothetical situation,
if we ever get into a Ladyhawke situation,
yes, if we're ever in a Ladyhawke situation, just kill me, all right? Which maybe that's a conversation I'll have with the Podmaster at some point. What she and I will do if we're ever in a Ladyhawke situation. I did think it was funny, by the way, that this movie does essentially present the thought exercise that is not uncommon for people in a relationship in 2023. It's become something of a meme to pose to each other, which is like, would you still love me if I was a slug or whatever? This movie is basically, would you still love me if I was a hawk, the motion picture? And if you're Navarre in this movie, the answer is definitively yes.
Yeah.
He's still very much committed to that relationship, even though she is a bird. Would you still love me if I was a bird? Podmaster, would you still love me if I was a wolf? She's shaking her head no.
Shaking that head.
No, absolutely not. If you're a wolf at night, you can... Oh, if I was a cat. All right. If I was a cat, she would still love me.
Philippe then just slips out from that sewer grate and unlocks the church door so Navarre can enter. And boy, he does.
Oh yeah. This is a great entrance.
This helm that he's wearing,
yes,
is really weird.
Yeah,
but I kind of like it. It looks. I don't know if it's like historically accurate or anything.
I don't know,
but it looks kind of fantasy science fiction-y.
Yeah, and Marquette has the same helmet, but I think in like white and gold.
Yeah.
And so it's clearly like part of the uniform, I think, for the captain of the guard, maybe. But yeah, and by the way, again, this whole time, Navarre has been in black. I've been referring to him as a goth zaddy because that's what he is. And in this scene in the church, everything is like very white. The bishop's outfit is white. A lot of the spectators are wearing white. Marquette, who there's about to be a little bit of a battle with here, is in mostly white. And I just think it's so cool that like the good guy here, like the protagonist, is coming in as like the man in black. It's sort of kind of, it has like kind of a Western feel to it.
I agree. It's kind of a nice inversion of like the tropes of the good guys wear white and the bad guys wear black.
Yeah, and he does have kind of throughout the performance, but in this scene specifically, he's got like a very like tall, dark stranger thing going on, where it's like, you know, if this was set 400 years in the future, he would probably be like a gunslinger. You know, he's got that kind of like Lone Ranger type of thing going on, which I like.
And so yeah, Marquette bursts in on horseback. And we are having a horse jousting fight in the middle of this cathedral. This was a set that they built because obviously you can't shoot this in an Italian cathedral.
This scene fucking rules.
This is the best scene in the movie.
It's the best part of the movie. I agree.
Again, I love action, so like of course I'm going to love this, but this is probably the standout scene in the movie for me.
And as much as I was talking about before how I like some of the more poetic, romantic stuff in this movie, I like some of the subtler moments, this is still my favorite part of this movie. You and I are on the same page here because it's so fucking good. It's very clearly in a lot of shots actually Rutger Hauer and this actor, I think his name's like Ken Hutchison, who's playing Marquette. It's actually clearly in a lot of shots these two guys on horses. In some of the shots, clearly stuntmen, right? But it is always a guy actually on a horse, actually swinging a sword at another guy who's on a horse with a sword. And it's framed a lot of the time wide enough and for long enough takes that you see like a full charge and swing and either parry or hit or whatever. We're not doing like quick editing cuts to like hide shit. They're actually really doing jousting choreo here, which I think is really impressive and really fucking cool.
It's beautifully shot, and there are we'll get into it, but there are stages to this fight. It is a longer sequence in the film, and really delivers. And Philippe has escaped from the church during this point.
Yes, when Hauer enters, basically, when Rutger Hauer enters the cathedral, Broderick exits.
It's because he's going to go get Navarre's longsword that he stashed underneath the cart.
Which he lied about losing under the ice, and I think that the idea there was because Navarre asks where his sword is after the whole wolf in the ice situation, and Broderick is like, we lost it under the ice, you know, and for a second, Rutger Hauer is like almost going to kill him upon learning that information, and then he sees the scratches on Broderick's chest, and Imperius is like, you did that to him when he saved your life, and Hauer chooses to like show him mercy there. But I think the reason I didn't really get this as a kid, but I think watching it last night, I think the reason he lies to him about the sword is to try and dissuade him from killing the bishop so that they can try to break the curse even though he's not on board with it. Because I think his idea is he's like, oh, this is his like family sword that he's using for his like holy quest to kill this bishop, and if he doesn't have the sword, maybe he won't do it. I think is maybe what the situation is.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think the reason he does bring it back, he does go get the sword, is Rutger Hauer needs to realize his destiny isn't necessarily to kill the bishop.
Right.
Like that last jewel that he wants on his sword is not to kill the bishop. It's to break the curse.
It's to be with Isabeau. It's a love jewel, not a revenge jewel.
So he needs to bring the sword back at the right moment when they've both appeared in their human forms.
Yes, and for the narrative, it works fine. Like for the tone, for the emotional moment in the movie, it works fine. That he like goes and gets the sword and brings it back and lied about it being lost. Like story wise, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But I like the emotional beat of him like tossing it into the battle and Navarre picking it up. Right.
There's this moment where Navarre disarms Marquette and he starts making a beeline towards the altar where the bishop is.
And we get a little bit of Navarre POV here through that helmet, which is like Terminator vision. Like he's just locked onto the bishop and there's like a guy running out and trying to fight him, and he like easily dispatches him and is like never wavering in this like march toward the bishop.
He's kind of just shoving guards over, and I mean, I do want to see Rutger Hauer kill these guys with his sword.
Yeah,
I do want to.
I agree. I think that both you and I, just the type of movies that we enjoy, we probably both would have liked this movie to be rated R and to have a little bit more sword violence.
But even still, like, we've killed people with crossbows.
Yeah.
We closed a wolf trap around Alfred Molina's neck.
Yeah.
I think we can probably have some bloodless sword deaths.
That's true.
At this point.
And he is just kind of shoving guys out of the way.
Because I don't think he does kill a guy with a throwing knife.
Yes.
And that's cool.
That's fun. And it is a guy who's about to start ringing the bell, which is like the sign of his failure.
Yeah.
Right? And so he chucks a throwing knife at that guy and kills him.
But then throwing knife guy ends up hanging on the rope that rings the bell. And the bell rings. And at this point, we discovered that what Imperius meant by a day without night and night without day is an eclipse.
Yes, and the way that we discover this is during the battle, which is ongoing with Marquette, right? Because Marquette's kind of like out of the way, and Rutger Hauer is like shoving these other guys out of the way on his way to the priest, but then Marquette like gets back up and continues fighting him. Like David said, this fight has multiple stages. At one point, Marquette's helmet gets knocked off, and he yeets it. The arm on this fucking guy, because that helmet cannot be light. It is a big metal medieval helm,
and it's a tall cathedral.
We're in a big ass cathedral, like a huge medieval cathedral, and he fucking yeets this helmet through like a stained glass window that perfectly lines up with where the sun is in the sky, and that's how it's revealed that what we were talking about is like the moment where you can break the eclipse break the curse is an eclipse. Yeah. Yes. I just thought it was so funny that he like just chucks his helmet through the fucking window, and apparently for no reason.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why.
Other than that he needed to make the sun visible from inside this building for the story. But yeah, so yes, an eclipse is a full solar eclipse is occurring, and I think in this moment, at least Broderick is putting together night without a day, day without a night.
Yes.
Right? He's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Right. Moon's going in front of the sun.
But of course, again, the bell is ringing, and Navarre thinks that this means that Imperius has taken the signal to kill Isabeau.
Yes.
And Philippe has come back in, and he throws Navarre the longsword. He sort of like slides it across the floor.
And we do cut to Imperius with the bird, right? And it does seem like he's maybe about to do it, but he's definitely hesitating.
Yeah.
Right.
But at this point, of course, Navarre thinks that Isabeau's dead.
Yes.
So even though Philippe has thrown the longsword to him, Navarre is just beating the shit out of Marquette.
Yes.
He is just wailing on Marquette on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, kicking him and punching him. It's awesome.
Yes, and there's some really cool moments. At least I think they're cool. I don't know how you felt about this. There's some moments here where the fight transitions into slow motion, and the sound design and editing here I think is really cool, because instead of just regular slow motion sounds, it's like echoing. So there will be like a clang or like a hit or like a or whatever, and it just like it reverberates like over and over and over, kind of in slow motion, as Rutger Hauer and Marquette are like wrestling with each other. And I think it's really cool and effective. I think it works really well.
Yeah.
And the light is also getting dimmer while this is happening because the eclipse is occurring. And I think it's just like a really cool visual, audio-visual moment.
And then does he kill Marquette at this point?
Yes. So basically the situation here is, while the eclipse is happening, Rutger Hauer has lost hope. He thinks Isabeau's dead, and he is wailing on Marquette. Eventually Marquette sort of gets the upper hand for a second, but both of them have dropped their weapons, and somehow in the scuffle Rutger Hauer gets a hold of Marquette's sword. And as Marquette is going to wail on him, Rutger Hauer's on the ground. Marquette has gotten back up. Marquette is like going to hit him again, and Rutger Hauer pulls up Marquette's sword, and Marquette essentially lands on his own sword,
right,
and is impaled and dies.
Okay, because from here now, Rutger Hauer picks up his sword, and advances on the bishop.
Which, by the way, we should say, the entire time this huge ass fight has been happening, like all this crazy violence between Navarre and Marquette, and also Navarre beating all these other guards out of the way, there's just a bunch of people who were just here for church.
They're just here for church.
Who are just hanging out. And it's funny because occasionally it'll cut to reaction shots of them, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, like what the fuck is happening?
But no one's screaming or running away.
No, I imagine that if you're in church in the 1400s or whatever this is, this must be like a pretty cool day for you. You're like, oh shit, all right, this is pretty dope actually. Like, guys are fighting. I just saw a guy get killed. This is way more interesting than my normal days at church. Normally I just listen to this bishop guy talk a bunch. He's kind of an asshole. Nobody really likes him. His sermons suck. This is way cooler than an average Sunday.
I would go to church if there was a sword fight every Sunday.
Oh yeah, totally. Which is probably what these people are thinking. They're like, oh man, I gotta come to church more often. Is it always like this?
So Navarre is advancing on the bishop, and the bishop is basically Emperor Palpatine at this point. He's like full, like, strike me down with all of your hatred.
Yes.
Like just chewing scenery left and right.
Yes.
Great performance.
Yeah, and really, he's doing really intense stuff with his eyes. He's like, Navarre. Yeah, it's really good.
But then Michelle Pfeiffer walks in.
Yes. Rutger Hauer is literally about to kill him.
Yeah.
Literally about to kill the bishop, and he says, damn you to hell. And then he like goes to swing his sword, and we hear from the back of the church Michelle Pfeiffer say, Navarre. And this is the first time he's heard her voice in 2 years. And he turns around and sees her in her human form, because during the eclipse, they're both human, right? And he doesn't kill the bishop in that moment because he's so taken aback and shocked, right? And then Navarre realizes that he has the opportunity to break the curse, and that Imperius was right. And this is my favorite fucking Rutger Hauer moment in this entire movie, where he, after having the realization, this is a day without night and a night without day, this is how to break the curse, and what Imperius said is the bishop needs to see you both.
Yeah.
Right? Rutger Hauer grabs the bishop, and he's like, look at me. And, like, really intensely, and is like, look at her. And then he does the look at us. and the bishop can't, because the bishop's whole thing, again, we sort of glossed over it. He does sort of have like maybe a wet dream about her earlier in this movie, where the bishop's kind of sleeping and writhing around, and I get the impression that he's dreaming about Michelle Pfeiffer as Isabeau, right? But he's like sexually obsessed with her. Like we kind of glossed over it. We said like, oh, the bishop was in love with her and he was jealous, but he's like a lecherous creep about it, right? He's very clearly like sexually obsessed and thinks he like should own her, right? And so when Rutger Hauer does this look at us moment, the bishop can't. Like he's averting his eyes, and he really doesn't want to look at Isabeau, right? Because it's like it's too much for him, right? Because this is like a thing that probably to him is an object of like sinful desire, right? And so he's like averting his eyes, and Rutger Hauer like screams at him, and it's such a like a commanding yell, and he's like, "Look at us!" And the bishop does, and the curse is broken.
Yeah,
and I think it's such a beautiful moment. It is so good, and John Wood doing his big performance here, and Rutger Hauer doing his big performance here. It's very melodramatic. It's kind of campy, and it works so well for me.
Yeah, I think it's a good moment too, and Isabeau just slowly walks up to the bishop, who the bishop's like cowering on the ground. She drops, like holds something out and sort of drops it at his feet. I couldn't quite tell what that was.
It was her little leather talon tie things for her as a hawk.
Okay.
Because they tie little things to birds' feet when they're like captive birds. I'm not sure what the purpose of it is, but that's what it was. It's essentially like her little hawk leash, right? And so she shows it to him and is like, "I'm not a bird anymore, motherfuck," right? And drops it, being like, "You don't get to control me," right? And it is her most powerful moment in the movie, and it is the moment where she shows the most agency. And I think a weakness of this movie is this type of moment should have happened multiple times throughout the runtime. It shouldn't have just been the one moment.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but she's very good in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think the movie gives her enough.
Gives
her character enough.
I agree. But this moment is really powerful and really good.
She does sell this moment pretty well.
And wordless, right?
Yeah.
It's just Michelle Pfeiffer doing really good face acting.
Yeah.
And she looks so fucking pissed off. She looks furious at him, which I think it really works. Like, it could be a moment where you kind of have her show grace or sympathy or something, and there's none of that, which I think is a strong choice. For her to be like, "Fuck you, guy who turned me into a bird." Like, I hate you, right? And you don't get to control me anymore, right? And so that moment happens, right? And then she turns away from him. And
to like look at Navarre.
Yes, and then we've heard earlier from Imperius that the bishop's rationale for summoning the devil and putting this curse on them that turns Isabeau into a bird and Navarre into a wolf. His rationale is if the bishop couldn't have her, then no man shall. Right, is what Imperius says. And so Michelle Pfeiffer here turns away after dropping the little hawk leash on the ground and saying like, "Fuck you, guy. I'm going to be with my goth zaddy now." And turns around, looks at Navarre, and the bishop says, "Then no man shall." And it's again very like full Palpatine, like very just evil villain voice.
And he lunges at her with his staff,
which has like a little sharp point on it to stab her.
And Rutger Hauer just chucks this fucking sword again.
Just like he did before in the scene with Broderick, he repeats the sword throw, but instead of going into a tree this time, it fucking fully goes through the bishop and like pins him to the altar behind him.
Which rules.
It rips. And we do see, it's a really brief shot, but we do see from the side the sword fully go through him and through the altar with blood on it. And then, really quick shot, but really excellent.
It's a great effect or stunt. I'm not sure how they did it.
Yeah. And then
but it's the best kill in the movie.
Yes. And the most important kill in the movie.
And it does kind of bring me back from like some of the tone issues I think this movie has, where I feel like it's not quite a movie for adults, but not quite a movie for kids, but I'm really back in.
Yes.
Once that sword goes through that fucking bishop.
Yep. And I really like that we got to have our cake and eat it too here, where we resolved the curse in the way that Imperius wanted, and the bishop didn't have to die to break the curse, but this motherfucker was evil. He had to go, man. Right? And so the curse is already broken, so guess what? Now we can kill him. And him being about to kill Isabeau, right, is motivation enough that Rutger Hauer doesn't just seem like a vindictive asshole. So it's like a fun little way for us to wrap up the narrative and be like, the curse is broken, but also the bad guy fucking gets it. Yeah. And there's a little trickle of blood out of his mouth. He has one last creepy Isabeau, and then he's gone. He's dead.
And they embrace, they profess their love for each other.
This is the third time I cried in this movie.
Everyone gives Matthew Broderick a little kiss on the cheek, which I thought was nice.
Yes, they give him a little pat on the head. Very good. Good boy, Matthew Broderick.
Thanks for looking out. I love this moment where Rutger Hauer picks up Michelle Pfeiffer and sort of spins her around a bit.
Yes.
As the kind of the churchgoers and the clergymen kind of closing around and just like awkwardly golf clap. Like, we're not totally sure what just happened, but they kissed.
And he killed the bishop, which we get the impression that nobody really liked that guy. Right? So they're like, all right.
We got to find a new bishop.
Yeah, but
okay.
Can't be worse than that guy. So yeah, and that's our romantic resolution. Romantic music swells. Michelle Pfeiffer is in Rutger Hauer's arms. He's spinning her around. And this is the only moment where the two of them get to share any on-screen chemistry.
Yeah.
And I was watching closely last night to be like, this is the only time you see them on screen together. How is it? Like, how's the chemistry? And I was like, it's actually good. They look at each other. The camera doesn't give you much, right? But what the camera does give you, the looks that they share, I was like, oh, like, this feels like a fitting and fulfilling end to this romantic relationship that has existed in two separate parts throughout this movie.
Yeah.
To this point, right? It doesn't feel like it's like, oh, these people have no chemistry at all. Like, these people are in love. Like, it doesn't feel that way to me.
Yeah, the script's definitely built up
how much
their relationship, how much they love each other, so it gives them something to work off.
Yeah.
Even though they haven't shared the screen at this point, up until this point.
Also, I imagine if you're playing opposite a 1985 Rutger Hauer or playing opposite a 1985 Michelle Pfeiffer, it's probably not that hard to be like, oh, I'm in love with this person.
Absolutely.
Because they're like the two most lovable people in the world at this time.
And that ends the movie.
Yeah, and we have Imperius and Broderick walking away and trading a couple of little comedic lines to end the movie, and we got credits.
Yeah, so that is Richard Donner's 1985 Ladyhawke. Justus.
Yeah.
My question for you is: Ladyhawke the greatest movie ever made?
David, I'm so glad you asked me that. I didn't expect you to ask me that.
It's only the conceit of our entire podcast.
Yeah. So I will say I have some, preconceived notions about this movie, having watched it as a child a bunch, right? I came into this with some baggage that David didn't come in with. And I am letting that sway my opinion because, I'm taking the totality of my experience with this film and not just this viewing. This viewing, I did have some problems with it. I think the script is a little bit uneven. I think it's maybe, we didn't really talk about this, but I think it's maybe a hair too long. It's 2 hours and 1 minute. I feel like you could cut 15 minutes from this movie here and there, and it probably wouldn't do much harm to it. As much as I like Melina, the whole Cesar movement in there is like totally unnecessary to the plot. Like, you could just lose that entire 10 minutes, and the movie would basically be unaffected. I'm glad they didn't lose it because I love that bear trap on the head. But the point being, there's some bloat in here, right? That being said, the score bangs. I think the performances are good. I cried 3 times. I think that it's a beautiful love story. I got caught up in the fantasy of it all, the magic of it all. And for me, watching this movie last night and kind of considering my history with it, I personally am going to say that Ladyhawke, 1985, directed by Richard Donner, is the greatest movie ever made. David, is Ladyhawke the greatest movie ever made?
I'm going to say no.
You're killing me.
This is my first time with
You're fucking killing me here, man.
This is my first time with it. It's not really my thing. I'm a little indifferent on it.
Yeah.
I think it runs a little too long, like you said. Like, this could be a tight 90 for me.
It could.
The tone's a little off, especially with Broderick. Yeah. And I think all of the cast not all the cast, but a good portion of the cast feels a little awkward in their roles, especially Broderick. But Rutger's the best out of them. Rutger Hauer is by far the best thing in this movie. It looks really, really nice.
Yeah.
There's a great mythic love story at the center of it, but I don't think the script fully delivers. But there's good action throughout it. I think, like, if you are interested in fantasy, and you haven't heard of this, this isn't a very well-known film. It didn't make a lot of money, like we said. It's probably worth seeking out. I just think for me, it is not the greatest movie ever made.
Man. Well, it's only episode 2. We knew this was going to happen eventually, but we do have a divided opinion here on greatest movie ever made. So if you, the listener, end up watching Ladyhawke, you should definitely let us know if you think it's the greatest movie ever made, and maybe help us resolve this tie that we have going on here.
And seek out a DVD copy if you
can.
Don't
watch that
Amazon Prime one. It looks like dog shit.
It's so bad. I mean, if there's no other way that you can watch the movie, fine, watch the Amazon stream, but just be prepared for a subpar viewing experience, because that stream is not doing it any favors. The movie is better than that stream gives it credit for, right?
And I wonder if I maybe watched it with a better resolution, I would have had a better experience with it. But a lot of it, I'm just kind of trying to get past the gorgeous movie that is buried underneath these layers of muck and slime with this terrible digital transfer.
Yeah, fuck Jeff Bezos, man.
Fuck you, Jeff Bezos.
All right.
And that's our show.
That's Ladyhawke.
Thanks for tuning in. Next week we are getting on a boat and heading up to Burma.
Heading to Problematic Town.
With Sylvester Stallone and John Rambo in the 2008 film Rambo.
Woo, baby! It's going to be a doozy.
We're going to actually record it right after this one. Yeah. But it'll come out a week later. So join us for that adventure, because I'm sure it'll be just as fun and stimulating and not at all uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely tune in to listen to two white guys talk about Sylvester Stallone, white savior in Myanmar, the motion picture. Yikes.
Until then, take care of yourself. Talk about the show. Let people know about the show. We'd really appreciate it. Take it easy.
Later, dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast, and if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.